When you come to Ecuador, these cities have, skyscrapers and high-speed internet and, all the accoutrements and restaurants, all different food. It's just a wonderful circumstance. You can go to Mercados, you can go to Super Maxis, whatever. It's a very different situation than what I think most people think.
Yep.
So the culture is great. The people are very welcoming. They use the dollar. Last summer, you may remember, we had a print 9.1% inflation. It was the highest since '82. So if you looked at the commodities chart, lithium, gasoline, soybeans, everything was at highs, and gold and silver and platinum were negative.
Right.
We have the highest inflation in 42 years. These have worked for about 3,000 or 4,000 years, but they're not working now. So
yeah, you're competing with no one, in general, over your idea. So the opportunity is incredible. The downside is that execution is 10x more difficult. So
Right.
You've got 10x the opportunity, and then you've got 10x the difficulty in executing. Because in general in Ecuador, there's a lot less pressure on your life than there is back home.
Fourth thing that may really blow Bitcoin out of the water is there's some pretty persistent rumors that 2 or 3 countries in Latin America and 2 or 3 in the Middle East are planning to adopt it. It's got sloppy up north. You could have problems in the stores with food, trucks, whatever.
Hello and welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Jesse, joined today by Robert Ryerson. Psyched to have this guest for you here today. We'll introduce Robert in a moment. But this is going to be a little bit of a different episode. I think it's going to be a cool episode. It's going to be kind of a mix between a podcast, a expat profile, and sort of a professional spotlight, because Robert really has some knowledge on all of those things. You prefer Robert or Bob? Bob, yeah. I normally call him Bob, but figured I'd introduce you formally. But yeah, Bob has some really has a unique perspective, I think, on economics, the economy, Ecuador, the States, some political stuff. He's got experience in both markets. Bob, by trade, is a retirement planner, so he's the principal at his company. I'll let him talk about this in a moment, where they do retirement planning and other tax and financial services. So he has that background, and then you've been coming to Ecuador now for a long time.
10 years, yeah, almost 10 years.
So why don't we start with just a little bit about who you are, where you're from, how your business, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
So I hail from North Jersey, live in Central Jersey now, married with 4 grown daughters, and have been a financial planner for, 1984, so almost 40 years. And gradually, just courtesy of the demographics, makes sense to lean into the retirement income planning, tax planning, estate and legacy planning aspects. So that's what we focus on, 55 to 75 years old. We teach classes, we do a lot of dinner presentations. In fact, we did one here a couple nights ago in Cuenca at a beautiful old mansion. There's 8,000 expats in Cuenca, retired largely, but they can still improve things a bit. So we had a very nice reception. We had 31 people the other night. So we've been coming here doing classes, and fell in love with the country about 9 or 10 years ago, and met a bunch of people here, both Ecuadorians and Americans, and just fell in love with the culture and the country. And it's unique. Cuatro Zonas blows us away. Galapagos, the coast, the Andes, the Orient, all completely different. Mm-hmm. And obviously been following you guys for a few years, and admire what you did 10 years ago, frankly.
So since you brought that up, in terms of Cuenca and like some of the other places, let's spend a couple of minutes on that. Cuenca is pretty much, I would argue, probably the go-to destination for foreigners in Ecuador.
Sure.
Maybe not so much for travelers, but for expats, for people who are moving here.
Some on the coast, Salinas and Manta a little bit, but basically Cuenca, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of other hot spots, up north, up by Otavalo and that area, Cotacachi. Right. You have that. You've got some spots on the coast. Mm-hmm. You've got, Loja, Vilcabamba is just kind of on the radar a bit. Then you've got Baños. So, there's some places people go, but Cuenca is the leader for sure. Yeah. And for our viewers, some people are, maybe a lot of people have never been to Ecuador, haven't been to Cuenca, Loja, Vilcabamba, Quito, all these other places, and it would be great to hear kind of from someone who's spent time in both places, What are some of those differences? And just to sort of preface for a second, you know, Cuenca off the bat is about 1,500 feet higher in elevation than Loja, so it's a different
cooler,
climate.
Yeah.
It's also a larger city, so it definitely has much more of a city feel if you're looking for nightlife and great restaurants and all. Cuenca's you're gonna do a lot better in Cuenca than Loja, for example. You know, Loja's much slower paced, much more relaxed, kind of a little bit different culture as well. But what have you know, if you were sort of saying to someone, hey, if you're into this, move to Cuenca. If you're into this, Vilcabamba, Loja, how would you compare this?
Well, the first thing I would say is that Louis and I, when we started coming down, when we did the research, we had preconceived notions. The average American has preconceived notions about Ecuador. They still think it's a banana republic. I think America's now a banana republic, frankly. But I think, so one of the first things to get out of their heads is that when you come to Ecuador, these cities have, you know, skyscrapers and high-speed internet and, you know, all the accoutrements and restaurants, all different food. It's you know, it's just a wonderful circumstance. You know, you can go to mercados, you can go to super maxis, whatever. It's a very different situation than what I think most people think. So the culture is great. The people are very welcoming. They use the dollar. It's easy. I don't know. We'll talk about whether that's a good or bad thing in a few minutes. That could be a problem. But the climate, the food, the organic, you know, Cuenca is 8,400 feet up. In the United States, if we go 8,400 feet up, we've got snow. Here at the equator, it's like San Diego every day, and this is even warmer. So, so you know, if you can deal with a little bit cooler, you know, sweater in the morning, shirt sleeves in the middle of the day, and sweater at night, that's Cuenca. Everything you want, restaurants, culture. Loja also, you know, the music capital, a little warmer. You know, you don't swim in Cuenca, you do swim in Vilca and Loja. So we did also, we got friendly with a gentleman, Wilson, who became a great friend and our concierge. And he drove us all over the place. We explored the coast. We went up to Cotocachi. There's a lot of Americans up there. Love to own a condo up there. So there's just different things for different people. The coast is, you know, you're whale watching and you have a different lifestyle than you would here in the South. But I think we've you know, complimented you and your team because the South is really a wonderful place to be on all fronts. I mean, you don't miss anything. You want some stuff, you go to the city. Basically, the lifestyle that you guys have here, even during COVID, if you want to kind of hint at that a little bit, it was different than Cuenca and Quito. And, you know, it didn't affect your lifestyle that much down here. They weren't locking down like crazy, you know, like they did in the States. And think about what they did in Canada and Australia, New Zealand. Terrible. Surprising, you know, terrible. So just a very nice, freer lifestyle here. As you hinted in one of your videos recently, the skies are clear here. There's no strange cloud formations, which is one of our concerns up north as well. So just a lot of reasons to come here. I think the fact that you guys run these retreats, what, every quarter?
Yeah, we're doing about 4 a year.
And you may want to talk about that if anybody's interested to get a good sense of what the lifestyle would be here. What are the retreats, 4 or 5 days?
No, they're actually 9 days.
Oh, it's 9 days.
So they're 9 days, and it's a
immersed.
jam-packed 9 days. It's a full. If you come for those 9 days, you will leave with knowing everything, you know, and experiencing.
That's worth it. We brought a friend who hasn't been here, and he was just blown out when you go to the mercados here, the food and the fresh fish and the meat, and you know, it's just. We don't have that at all.
You before we started recording, you were sharing with me a story where, so I think was it Amish farmers got raided due to raw milk or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, this very well-known, famous Amish farm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, just got raided. I don't know why. You know, what are they searching for? Raw milk and organic eggs and stuff.
I was laughing. I was kind of internally chuckling to myself because before I came here, I had just gone a few blocks that way to pick up my milk.
There you go.
That the lady brings once a week. You know, that literally has been, you know, the cow's been milked an hour ago.
Right.
And picking up my milk, and there's no, and there's not even, you know, there's no regulatory framework here for any of that stuff that I'm aware of at all. Much less agencies that enforce it. Right?
Yeah, right. The control of the food up north is just getting, you know, and God knows what they're putting in it. So we're increasingly concerned and find this story. I don't know what it would take. You know, there's a zillion little farmers bringing stuff to the markets here. You know, how would you really
Right.
clamp down on that. So it's a pretty appealing food situation. The fruits, I was saying to you before we started filming that the juices in the morning here just blow us out. I mean, it's just, I never heard of this fruit, but it's delicious. It's good. Yeah, every day it's who go to what, so we learn, but it's just fantastic.
So what, Ecuador's received, and I think some of it's warranted, some of it isn't, but Ecuador has received a lot of bad press over the last, 6 months or something, mostly around safety, mostly around crime and
issue,
safety. You've been coming here for about a decade,
Right.
so you're obviously super familiar with the country. You've been, when you
All
come
over-
from
we've been all over the place,
from
yeah.
my observations, right? You basically rent a van and you travel all around
All
the
around,
country.
yeah.
So you're really exploring the country in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on safety? How do you feel when you're here? Do you feel like there's a big difference now? Overall, how do you feel about safety?
Well, I think that the distinction has to be made. Cuenca, along the Andes, where you guys are here in the south, it's not an issue really. It's really on the coast. Obviously, they shot Villa
Villavicencio, yeah.
a candidate in broad daylight in the capital in the presidential race, but we've done it in the United States, right? Back in '63 and other times.
Reagan
Reagan
got
got
shot as
shot. Wallace got shot, so it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the problem is, and we love the coast, Manta, and this area, but 4 years ago, it was not, 3 or 4 years ago, it was not like this. And the drug trade may be coming up from Peru, I assume. I mean, if you're a fisherman and they say to you, hey, you can either fish for the next 10 months or here you go, one shot.
Or 10 years maybe.
Or 5 years, yeah. So it's very hard to argue with. It's kind of like the magistrates and the police, the whole Mexican situation, right? How do you really, fight that off? So it's a concern because we love the coast, and if they don't get that straight, they shot the mayor of Manta with a soccer player. They shot up a funeral home. So I don't know. We're friendly with Ryan Kelly. He's having a great year. So I think the Americans understand that every major city in the United States is in trouble now with the crime, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean that people don't go to New York or Philly or whatever. So it's the same thing. If you have a condo on the coast in Manta, I think you're fine, and you walk go get your gelato or your supermarket, whatever, or the mall.
Okay. And then what's your interest? So is your interest in Ecuador personal? Is it business? Is it a mix? Yeah. So talk a little bit about just why is Ecuador interesting to you in the first place?
Well, as you and I have talked for the last 2-3 years, the upside, the opportunities here relative to a pretty mature market in the States is just wide open. We were just talking before we started shooting the vanilla story, right? Vanilla is this finicky spice. But this is one of the few places you could do it here successfully. You and I talked about a watermelon plan. You could make money with watermelons here, table grapes, chirimoya, whatever the case is. So, it just seems endless. And one of the things we'd really like to do is to get some client money. If we have some happy money from Bitcoin or gold or silver or things outside the dollar, the idea of keeping it outside the dollar and doing agriculture or foreign real estate projects with you in Ecuador. You've got people coming in from Europe, you've got people coming in from the U.S. I know you want to talk about some of your projects as well, but so our longer term goal, frankly, is to do more business here, to get more money here, to get people here, to get second homes here. It's it's a beautiful place. I mean, look where we're sitting today.
Yeah.
So it's personal and business. Yeah, we're very fascinated. They use the dollar. The government is relatively stable here. I think there's tremendous instability at home. I mean, we've got who's on the ballot, who's off the ballot. It's really getting crazy here, right? So we don't think, for example, we're not so sure there is an election in November this year. We think it's possible there's a pause, that things are sloppy enough politically, or God forbid in cities or whatever. We're not in normal waters.
Yeah.
Nothing would surprise us at this juncture after what we've seen. So we're just in strange waters. Well, we should talk about that in regard to the markets. Too.
Yeah. So maybe this can lead into some of that. But so traditionally, markets like Ecuador are considered high risk, and markets like the U.S. are considered low risk traditionally, right?
Traditionally, yeah. Developed versus emerging.
Yeah, and if you look at the history of Latin America, and you look at the history of the U.S., that makes total sense, right? You've got revolutions here all the time, and you've got currency crises, and you've got all kinds of stuff that goes on. And in the U.S., we've been relatively stable for, since at least
100 years.
World War II. Yeah.
Right. After World War II, right.
Yeah, monetarily and politically. So that has made sense, traditionally, historically. I came to the conclusion 12 years ago or whatever it was, hey, I don't think the dollar is as stable as people realize. I think that the debt markets are I don't think people realize how levered all of their assets as well as their economic activity is to the debt markets, which made me uncomfortable at the time. And I started to look at the U.S. for me personally, like what I'm doing with capital, what I'm doing with time and energy. I started to look at it as kind of a risky market, for me, right? I feel like, well, if there's a hiccup in the debt market, what happens to my XYZ investment and stuff like that? And then even politically, you can make the argument there's much more risk now in the U.S. than there has been traditionally. So how do you look at that? Like, why are you looking towards Ecuador investment-wise because of some of those things, or like how do you look at those two markets at this point?
Yeah, as a diversification for sure, right? And so let me give you an example of how crazy things are. Now, there's complacency in markets. If the markets in real estate or gold or stocks are up for so long, people just get complacent. So here's how crazy it is right now. So we have 34 trillion in debt. We just hit that on the 29th of December. On the 18th of September, we hit 33 trillion. So we're growing, trillions per year now.
People
right?
can't even conceive of what $1 trillion
Well, one of the
means.
things, right?
Like,
So speaking to that point, Lou and I show when we teach the classes, we show a little 2-3 minute video, a visualization of trillions, because who the heck knows what that is, right? And it's fascinating. It starts out, here's a $100 bill. If you wrap it, there's 10,000. If you put it like a tea chest, it's 1 million. You put it on a pallet, stack it up, it's 100 million. You do 10 pallets, picture the $100 bills, it's 1 billion. Right. And then it says, the slide says, put your seatbelt on or something like that, because the next shot is a football field of double stacked pallets, and that's 1 trillion. And so the truth
$100 bills.
Of $100 bills, thank you, right, not 20s. So the truth is nobody's getting paid back 34 trillion, the Germans, the Chinese, the Koreans, never gonna happen. No. So as long as people play this game of we'll roll it, and by the way, the euros and the yen, all the paper, all the fiat stuff is
every
nuts.
currency on earth.
So one of the things that you and I have been amazed at is from 10 or 12 years ago is how long they've been able to keep this going. Speaking of which, in the 08-09 dip, right? They remember the phrase "too big to fail," right? So previously we had the savings and loan crisis. They let things fail. The capitalist system has to purge itself, right? That's how the growth comes. You have failure. The assets are mismanaged. They go to better hands. I don't care if it's a big name. Sorry, that didn't work. Citibank, Eastman, Kodak, whatever. But they didn't let that happen. They bailed everybody out, printed money, and blew the bubble bigger. ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, had a name for it. So mortgages are not 2.5 or 3. What the heck is that? I mean, God bless anybody who did that, right? Which is a lot of people. Sure. We encouraged everyone to refinance repeatedly. So there's, 30-year paper at 2.8. Wow. And then CDs and bonds went to 0 or 1% for 12 years. So that forced, that's why you got this bubble into real estate and stocks. And then we've had a little break, but now we're at the point where if people understand the treasuries are the debt, right? So if the yield on treasuries are 4 or 5 on 34 trillion,
payments go up.
So right now, the second largest item in the budget after Social Security is interest. It's ahead of Medicare and Medicaid right now. And that's air. You're not getting any value for it, right? So that's not sustainable. So Powell and Janet Yellen will come out and say, the financial media says this is not sustainable, and yet here we are, right? It's early January of 2024. We just broke 34 trillion. It's not sustainable. I don't know what happens, but to your point with the dollar, then simultaneous to them printing money like crazy, trillions per quarter, per year, now you've got the BRICS. We should talk about the BRICS a little bit. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, right? Nothing new, 9, 10, 11 years, but accelerating. So the BRICS don't want to use the dollar. Right, so we've been very spoiled in the States since '73, the petrodollar, Henry Kissinger. 50 years of everybody has to transact everything in dollars. So just recently, you probably know, late August, there was a meeting in South Africa, and 5 countries joined. 31 countries want to join the BRICS. 5 did get approved, including Argentina, Iran, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates. I can't remember what the fifth. Anyway, about 3-4 weeks ago, the United Arab Emirates came out and said, no more dollars for oil. Oh, Saudi Arabia was the other one. So if United Arab Emirates, that's big news. No more dollars for oil. So imagine if Saudi Arabia says that. I don't know, or Iran says that. So Russia already doesn't want to use the dollar. China doesn't. So the struggle that we have is convincing people. I want to get back to the complacency issue. They sit with us, they have literally, Jesse, 95% of their money in their 60s or 70s in stocks. Okay? We asked them to take 5% and put it into silver at 10-year lows, or if they get Bitcoin or gold or whatever, farmland,
some of those alternative asset
out of the
classes,
dollar. And they've got to think about it because they're comfortable. Paper's been so good for so long. So the Ecuador story, yes, it's the dollar, but if you have, it's foreign real estate, it's agriculture, there's, you know, it's a nice diversification. So we're trying to do that. And I think the returns here can have been and can be good.
Yeah.
So that, you know, I just think that's the problem, is that there's tremendous complacency with the paper money, and we try to say to people politely, you're still working, you get paid in dollars. Your property, your real estate's in dollars. All of your retirement, everything's in the dollar. And your country, for better or for worse, accidentally or purposely, is destroying the value. Maybe it's been slow, but it sure looks like it's going to accelerate. And we know from around the world, you know, Venezuela, I mean, is a terrible example. So we're not sitting there telling people we're going to expect hyperinflation, but I'll tell you, we're doing a lot of stupid stuff, and you can't historically do this. You can't just print paper and expect that everybody's going to trust it. We bought a pizza, I don't know what's a pizza down here, for a nice pizza with toppings? How much?
What does it cost? About $10.
Okay, so we just bought, so our pizzas were $18 or $20 a year or two ago. We bought a pizza last week for the office with toppings, $33, and $5 for the driver.
Right.
So $38 for a pizza? So, you know, the inflation is starting to really kick up, and people are starting to feel it.
Yeah.
The food and energy mostly, but you have to be concerned about this trade. If you think about a hockey stick, they're borrowing and spending. We're on the handle of the hockey stick at this point. It's exponential. 34 trillion. You know, I don't know where it ends, but it's historically you can't do this. So we're trying to get people to diversify a little bit, 5 or 10, 15%. Historically, if things get sloppy with inflation, that little 5 or 10 or 15 will protect the other 85 or 90.
Right.
That's all it takes.
Right.
And they fight us.
Yeah. I mean, that's you know, those battles can be tough battles to fight when people obviously are used to
complacent.
Yeah, they're complacent's the right word, and they're accustomed to a certain way of doing things. I mean, you know, always, you know, in the investment world, my whole life, you know, you hear about diversification, and then people say basically that means stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, right? Which is all.
I have some small caps and some large caps.
Large caps, right? It's all levered to the U.S. It's all levered to the dollar. It's all levered to the debt market. So
anything. It turns out that fine art beats the S&P over time. Certainly, the lithium, copper, all of the base metals, the agricultural commodities, silver, for example, if we could spend a minute there. The situation of silver is very strange, very attractive. Silver is about $25 an ounce. 13 years ago, it was $50 an ounce, right? We have 4 years now running of deficits. Last year, 2022, the deficit was 238 million ounces. Record demand. Medical imaging, solar panels, electric vehicles, smartphones, every electrical contact in everybody's house is silver. Record demand, a record shortage, 238 million ounces, and it did nothing.
right.
So there's a suppression effort, gold also platinum, a suppression effort long-standing going on. Some people struggle with that idea that items can be suppressed, but they certainly can. By now, I mean, JP Morgan Chase, who's the main player in that field, paid almost $1 billion fine a couple of years ago. They're putting some traders in jail. Scotiabank, HSBC, there's a number of players, and they do it on the COMEX, right? They have the leverage, they can suppress it. And I think the main reason is if gold and silver are hitting new highs successively, people will lose faith in the money. It's the canary in the coal mine. If we can keep gold and silver quiet, then we believe in the paper longer. So I also think you can only keep the beach ball under the water for so long, right? And so silver, I can't think of any other major asset that's down 50% in 12 years. It's crazy with record demand and a record shortage.
All of the conditions would have said gold and silver are seeing new highs. Given the amount of printing we've done and all that.
Right. In fact, last summer, you may remember we had a print 9.1% inflation. It was the highest since '82. So if you looked at the commodities chart, lithium, gasoline, soybeans, everything was at highs, and gold and silver and platinum were negative.
Right.
We have the highest inflation in 42 years. These have worked for about 3,000 or 4,000 years, but they're not working now. So
Yeah, I mean, I would argue too, I don't know what you think about this, but I would argue also that the cryptos took some pressure off of the metals as well. Because
Yes.
capital that would have gone into metals went into cryptos. Because people think
so.
that they also act as an inflation hedge, potentially with more upside, and so a lot of people, piled into crypto when they would have been piling into gold and silver. I think that may have taken some pressure off of that market as well.
I think so. We're very bullish on Bitcoin, Litecoin, a few different Ethereum. If we could talk about Bitcoin for a minute, there's still, we see people, we don't really fight them. There's still a lot of people who think it's a scam, it's backed by nothing. They have dollars backed by nothing, but they think that
Right.
Bitcoin is right. So they're very negative, it's a scam. One of the things that makes us laugh is that, what's her name, the lady with the white hair in Europe, IMF head.
I should know that. I do know
Anyway.
that. What's her name?
The financial officials in Europe and the U.S. say that Bitcoin is used, Jamie Dimon, it's nefarious purposes, it's money laundering,
Right, sure.
it's
Drug
right?
dealers, yeah.
And the truth is, whenever I see those Mexican closets with the money, that's dollars. It's not Bitcoin, right? The dollar is really the biggest for,
Yeah.
unfortunately, trafficking and drugs and weapons. It's the dollar. So they just don't want people to own. But the Bitcoin story, there's a confluence of events occurring right now. We're very bullish. We think it's going to explode. There's a halving event. You mine Bitcoin, and by protocol, every 4 years, the miners get half of the reward that they were getting. So it's a supply issue, and we're almost done. When it's all done by protocol, there's 21 million Bitcoin. We're about 19 million now. There's very little coming. April 25th of 24 is the next halving event. If you look at the charts long term, every time there's a halving event, this thing explodes the next year or two. That's number one. Number two, there was recently, you remember what FASB is, financial accounting, FASB rule, Financial Accounting Standard Boards makes it easier now to hold Bitcoin as a corporate asset.
Right.
So if you think about the cash that some of these companies have, if just a chunk of them does what Michael Saylor did and starts putting Bitcoin in. The third thing is, and it could be any day now supposedly, is there may be 5 or 10 or 12 cash ETFs for Bitcoin. Fidelity, Invesco, BlackRock, Grayscale. If these get approved, there's a lot of people who are not going to do a wallet and learn a digital wallet so fast with Bitcoin,
Right,
but they know how to buy. Hey, buddy, buy me at Fidelity, buy me 50 grand of Bitcoin, right? So we think there's a torrent of money coming in from that. So those three things are pretty much in place. The fourth thing that may really blow Bitcoin out of the water is there's some pretty persistent rumors that 2 or 3 countries in Latin America and 2 or 3 in the Middle East are planning to adopt it. So we saw what Bukele did 3 years ago with El Salvador, and we thought maybe somebody would follow him, but it hasn't happened. But now, persistent rumors that Qatar, or Qatar as they call it, and maybe United Arab Emirates or the Saudis, they're talking about huge investments. They call them sovereign wealth funds instead of like an endowment or a hedge fund, sovereign wealth fund. So if they come in if they want to buy 1 million Bitcoin, where are you getting it from? There's no supply. So there could be just a dramatic explosion. There's 3 or 4 catalysts or confluence of events that are very, even if you don't like Bitcoin, don't close your mind to it because it may be fantastic going forward. May drag other cryptos with it. Certainly, they're all going to follow Big Mama Bitcoin. But the idea is just to get some money out of the dollar. If you have everything in the dollar, and the dollar has a rough run here at 34 trillion and rising, that's the concern.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too when you look at, and certainly there's a lot of compelling arguments for Bitcoin. I think you just made several of them, and I would agree that truly institutional money is not in yet.
And once that happens, the retail guy's gone.
That's right.
This thing's hundreds of thousands.
That's right. And even mainstream retail money's not in yet.
Right. That's about to happen with the ETFs.
Right. And it looks to me, as you said, I mean, I'm not saying anything you didn't say, but it looks to me also that the prerequisites that would need to be in place for that to happen are in process / pretty well set up at this point.
Right there, yeah.
So I do agree with a lot of that. So as you look at, or I should say this, there's the lifestyle stuff you know, in terms of when someone's thinking about where they want to live and how they want to set up their life. There's the lifestyle
You
stuff.
mean like how they want to breathe and eat?
Yes.
Drink water
Yeah.
from streams that you can drink. Oh. A little bit different here.
A little bit different, exactly, and that's kind of where I'm going. Yeah, so
Well, excuse me for interrupting you,
please,
but
that's okay.
you tell your story that 10, 12 years ago you're thinking, I want to have clean food, I want to breathe clean, I want to have water, and those things are no longer a given in the U.S. In fact, we could spend a whole, there's big concerns about the food and the water and the other, mandates, so to speak, that didn't reach here. And, we can drink the streams around here. It's a very different story. So for somebody who's looking for a relaxed lifestyle, also, I guess we should talk about the cost of living down here. If somebody retires in the United States with $2,000 or $3,000 Social Security check, maybe two of them,
good luck,
and a pension,
yeah.
Down here you're living like a king and a queen, So it's very different. I mean, the standard of living, even Cuenca is cheap, right, relatively, but down here it's just, you've got a really relaxed lifestyle. You do have plenty of culture to enjoy, so you don't lack for that. You got airports, you got buses, you got trains, you got all that stuff. So it's just it's an investigation. We did it. It's not the only place. Obviously, Costa Rica and Panama are popular, but Ecuador just fits all the, as you said, ticks all the boxes. I think for most people, for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's funny. You brought up inflation a few minutes ago. I think you said we hit a 9% number at some point.
Well, last year it was a 9.1 print. It was the worst in 42 years. They're telling us now it's only 3%, 3 on top of 9, so 12 in 2 years is basically.
Right.
So if you believe the 3, we don't believe it's 3%. Most people that we sit with at the conference table, just their food bill, medical, property taxes, it's not 3%.
Yeah.
That's the number the government puts out.
No, I mean, those numbers have been phony for decades,
Long
and we
time.
know that, and right. That's true.
Right.
Ecuador just printed, I was reading this morning, Ecuador just printed an inflation number. I assume it was for 2022, or 2023, I should say. It was like 1.3.
Beautiful.
And that is probably also not accurate, but when something here, maybe in the last couple of, maybe in the last 3 to 5 years, might have gone from $1 to $1.10 or $1.25 or $1, there may have been some very
incremental,
some small. But when I go back to the States, a $10 sandwich in the last 5 years is now like 22, or it's like
nuts.
18.
That's why I give the pizza example.
It's a totally
it's just nuts.
And
a $5 and $10 lunch is out the door now. There's no such animal.
And it's like what I've noticed. And it bleeds into lifestyle, but it also certainly plays a factor in economic decisions and investment decisions as well. But what I've noticed is that in general in Ecuador, there's a lot less pressure on your life than there is back home, and I think part of that is this stuff, right? So when you've got inflation the way it is back home, you've got just the cost of things going up as fast as they are,
right.
And then you've got all of the other things that add financial pressure, right? So you've got property taxes.
Oh.
Which you
Costs.
better keep your job just to pay your property
Right.
taxes,
even after the house is paid.
even after it's paid, because I mean in some places,
well, New York and New Jersey
it can be wild,
it's just
yeah,
insane.
But even my dad, I mean, he's up in rural Vermont. I think his tax bill like 6, 7, 8 years ago when I was asking him about it, I think it was like 8,000-9,000 for
in rural Vermont.
In rural Vermont.
Yeah, so where we are, 10 to 20,000 a year is
like normal,
standard,
right?
Yeah.
So in Ecuador, you essentially have no property taxes. Like on a $100,000 valuation, you pay $100 annually. So you have essentially no property taxes. That creates less pressure. Then the same thing with the inflation story. But I would argue that's true in almost every level, right? So like I've had all these. I've been to a doctor a few times recently dealing with a medical thing, and I was just so struck by how that works here versus back home. The doctor cared, took his time.
Yep. Personal.
I paid, the doctor visit was $27. That's what it cost me. I had some imaging done. The imaging was just because I wanted it done. I didn't have what do they write you?
Script,
for the imaging. And I just went and just told them I want to have this imaging done. They're all no problem. It's it's $80, $70 for the 2 images I needed. The difference there, same with car insurance, homeowners insurance, all of it, right? In the States, you have to spend so much money just to be alive.
Yeah, right. Just to maintain a decent lifestyle.
Yeah. And whereas here, it's like people own their own homes. They don't have the pressure of the property taxes. They don't have the pressure of all of the different stuff they have to pay into. They don't have all the overheads of insurances and
Right.
and it just takes the pressure out.
Well, so if we go back to the person, even somebody with 2,000, 3,000 a month, 4,000, 5,000 in the U.S., if they came here, there's money to go back, see the kids, the nieces, nephews, whatever the case, back and forth, not a problem. There's extra money in the budget. You can go travel, you can do. So, you don't have to live here the full time, but I mean, I think there's a case to be made because the money, the average retiree or person working, right, if it's remote, the lifestyle is so much calmer here and healthier. And then if that money if the budget is like this, you've got the money to go back and visit. It's something to consider. We ask people to consider it, but most people are. The big move is to go from the northeast to the southeast.
Right.
And
Florida.
Florida is now as expensive.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know if you know what. The Florida real estate. There used to be you sold up in New York and New Jersey, and you did the Florida thing. It's approaching parity. Florida is very expensive now.
Well, those kinds of things are going on even in places like Idaho and Wyoming and
Texas,
Montana,
Carolinas. Yeah. It's not the same. So the Panama. We have clients retiring to Panama, Costa Rica. It's worth consideration. I know you use the phrase "getting out of the matrix." That rat race type of. Even retirees have a bit of a matrix type of lifestyle up there. The matrix is less. There's less glitches in the matrix here, I think.
Yeah. So you don't speak Spanish, correct?
No, not
yeah.
yet.
So you don't fully speak Spanish. You're from the Northeast U.S., but you come here and you're happy and you don't mind operating and you enjoy the people and you don't have a negative outlook. What do you think allows you to be successful here? Like, is there something that you can speak to?
Yeah, one thing, I mean, you guys say it all the time, you're very smart to say it, that people who come here have to realize that you're not in the United States. You can't, my partner Louis speaks Spanish, and so he understood, you and I in New York and New Jersey, you came here and you're frustrated, like, what the heck, everything is so slow. A no doesn't really mean no. I'll meet you at 2 doesn't mean 2, 3, 4. So you once told me, which I laughed at, that you realized by about the second or third year that if you made an appointment with somebody at the office at 2, you should actually be downtown at 2, and at 2:45 you'll call and you'll meet. So that type of stuff blew me out. So that was kind of hard because when we set up even a corporation here and when we do anything business-wise here, it's a very different. We're used to chop, go to Staples, get this done. So it's a different mentality. But I think the people are so welcoming and they do what the attitude is so good. It's just a very different approach. So to be Northeasterners to come here, you got to change. You got to chill out a little bit. But it's worth it because everything happens. And guess what? If it happens a little slower, that's not the end of the world. What you came out of and what I'm still doing is, I got to email this client right away. It's intense and does it really matter if it's the next day or two? So it's a change of mentality, really.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pushing 11 years in. My nervous system is still unwinding from
being wound. So
the U.S. Get it done on time. We gotta go. I'm late. I'm gotta go. My nervous system is still unwinding.
You and I've joked about this. Yeah, I'm sure if I got here full time, it would be very slow for me to. It's like when I do get to the beach, my wife, the first couple of hours, it's just I'm not.
You don't know what to do.
Yeah, I'm on the beach. Like, what the hell am I sitting here 2 hours now? It's not good. Not good. That matrix thing. No
Going
good.
inside, get some work done.
Yeah, right. Can I bring my laptop to the beach? No, you cannot. So there's something to be said for this situation. It can be frustrating. An American here has to really learn. Some of the stories you've told me are funny, and I'm in the same mode, being Northeast. Maybe somebody from Texas would have a little easier transition, or from Alabama or North Carolina, but boy, the Northeast, it's tough. But it's just, it's so beautiful and so nice and so compelling. The whole overall story is so compelling. It's worth backing off and realizing, you got to do it their way. You're in their country,
So you've done a good amount of traveling. Sounds like in maybe other places, but you've mentioned to me about Latin America.
Uruguay.
Go ahead. Yeah. I'm curious, either within Ecuador but also outside of Ecuador. Like, what are some of your favorite places that you've been?
Well, I actually haven't been as many places I'd like to go. We like Uruguay. One of the reasons why we like it is most people can't spell it or find it. So there's that.
Minuscule country. I mean, it's tiny.
Yeah, it's about the size of Ecuador. Has nice beaches.
Is it the same size as
Yeah,
Ecuador?
it's the
I
same
didn't even
size,
know
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
I
it's
thought
not
it was
that, not
much
that
smaller.
small. Very different. It's very flat, well watered, very fertile. All the population's on the coast, very small, 1/5 the size of Ecuador. 100% literacy, no bad actors, very nice country. Same thing with Costa Rica. Haven't really been to Mexico other than Tijuana, a little bit to a resort here and there. But I want to go explore that more. I've been to the Caribbean, been to Europe. I think, Europe has problems. Europe culturally has fallen apart too. So I don't see that here. This is very long. The culture here is so ingrained and so, I don't know if the word is protected, but there's nothing shaking this. They're not doing all the wacky stuff that we're doing up north, at least not yet, or not to the degree. So very family oriented, very.
You mean kind of
stable.
culturally?
Culturally,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a respect here it's lost in the U.S. I mean, there's groups. Everybody's fighting for recognition and control and power in the U.S. It's just not. It's not the same here. It's just a much more respectful, calmer society. I mean, there's some problems. I know you guys had in the last election, the indigenous folks tried to, that would be, I think, bad for business. And I know you were concerned about that, but I mean, you guys have politically what's happening to us now is what happens down here, right? So, we've had people tell us, from down here, what the hell's going on up there? That's what we do down here.
Yeah, right.
So if everything else being equal, if we're living in a banana republic up here, let's go where the bananas are. That's kind of my thought, right? If I live in a banana republic, let me come down where the bananas are and the mangoes. So
No, I mean, it's interesting you say that. There is some truth to that because if you're
more and more every day.
if you're talking about a scenario or a situation where sort of the fabric of or the nature of the systems break down a bit, you'd rather be in a place where people are used to that.
Absolutely.
Versus a place where people are very used to relying on all of these functioning systems, services, so on and so forth.
Yeah, to your point, this simpler situation here, if things got sloppy up north, you could have problems in the stores with food, trucks, whatever. You go to a mercado here, there's 850 little farmers bringing potatoes and strawberries and sugarcane. I mean, it's not, I struggle to think, the ease of getting electricity here and internet, it's just, seems like a more secure, ironically, right? We talked about Ecuador versus the U.S. for the last 50 years. It seems it's more in your favor to be a little protected and safer here compared to being totally dependent on the grid up there and things functioning smoothly. It could get, it has gotten sloppy in different cities and stuff.
Yeah.
So the stock market, there are bear market cycles on average every 7 years. The average is 40%. The last two were 50. It's worth mentioning that March of 20, well, let me go back. Late February of 20, Louis and I are looking at the TV in the conference room and there's, 10-lane highways in China empty. Wow, what the heck, the second largest economy. And the American stock market's hitting highs. Well, the next month, March, in 1 month, the market fell 37%. But then they printed money like crazy, trillions, and by October, you were back to even. That's not normal. That's not a bear market, unfortunately, is 6 or 12 or 18 months or maybe a lost 5 or 10 year period. So nobody wants those, but they're needed. They're called cycles for a reason. So when you just print money to eliminate that natural cycle, that cleansing, painful cycle, what the hell happens when
The collapse gets worse. That's all.
yeah,
Right?
thank you. You just postpone, and it just gets worse. It's kind of like the suppression of silver.
Yeah.
Silver is not going to go to 50 or 75. It's got to go crazy, right? If they mess it, how could Bitcoin fall asleep for 2 years given what's going on, right? So you hate to sound like a lunatic, but there are clearly rigged in one direction or other. A lot of things are rigged. They're not real. They're suppressed. The news is false. It's very hard to. So we're trying to get. Bulk of what we do is try to get people to understand they need money to last as long as they do. Oh, and by the way, taxes might go up, and by the way, inflation might go up, and you might get sick. So we use the analogy of climbing down a mountain. and there's peaks and crags and loose gravel to slip on. And so if you want to leave a legacy to loved ones, if that's important to you, we only have to get past all these big problems, right? So it's not simple. It's the idea that somebody's just going to pull money off their portfolio. Okay, your portfolio is down 48% and it's been 6 years, and you're pulling. Guess what? You're going to run out of money. So it's you don't want to be gloomy and doomy. But when the markets are high, we worry about crashes. When the markets are low, we want to scoop up the pearls on the beach after the storm. And so we love stocks. We just don't like them right now.
What are the pearls on the beach right now?
Well, it's certainly silver. It's certainly platinum. It's certainly things like here, right? If you can, maybe you should speak for a minute or two. You've got projects. Why don't you tell people what they can do, either from a house standpoint or from a community or from agricultural? We've talked about it for you. Why don't you tell people what the upside is here?
Yeah,
they can make money in watermelons, you told me, right?
Yeah, you can make money. Here's how I look at Ecuador. So again, I'm almost 11 years in. Ran a couple, we've done a few different businesses here. We've lived here, so on and so forth. The way I look at Ecuador is it's a very kind of beautiful sort of dichotomy. If we're just talking about from an investment business standpoint, it has more opportunity than you could ever ask for. It tends to be a very kind, caring, family-oriented culture that is not super entrepreneurially oriented,
right.
Who don't necessarily look at their life and economics the same way we do, and the barrier to entry for international capital has been such that there practically isn't any in the country because of its history. Right. So
and they're welcoming.
They're very welcoming, right. But they don't have the business infrastructure in place for large players for it to even be worth it for them to go through the due diligence to even look at Ecuador. So you don't have international ag in any sort of real way in the country. You don't have, there's some large companies certainly. There's people, there's corporations
business,
doing
the flowers,
stuff. Yeah,
the shrimp. Yeah,
you're competing with no one,
right.
In general over your
Incredible.
idea. So the opportunity is incredible. The downside is that execution is 10x more difficult. So
Right.
you've got 10x the opportunity, and then you've got 10x the difficulty in executing, because creating systems, creating teams, creating processes,
Fighting
all
through the
that
red
stuff
tape,
is
yeah.
much more difficult, and it's more time consuming.
But if you fight through it and you have a team of, I know you mentioned just in the other day that you use Milton, you said something very clever. You said, at this juncture, you can get everything done. But Milton, the nuances in the colloquialisms and the mechanics, Milton could do it faster, cheaper, better than you. So why not use locals, right? And then if we can employ locals and help them out, and the whole, we want to. The more we get things going down here, we want to help the locals. We want to pay them more. We want to. We just are hooking up with a couple of charitable foundations, mostly medical. There's such a need. They can't get prescriptions. They can't get an eye operation. They can't get. So Ed Lindquist,
Nice.
our buddy, is. We call him the unofficial mayor of
Yeah.
Cuenca. He really
And
is.
he's going strong. He's in his 90s, isn't he?
No, his 70s. Yeah.
Oh, 70s. Okay, I don't know.
He's
For some
going
reason,
strong.
I had it in my head that
he's
was older
unstoppable.
than
He has
that.
more. He has as many business ideas as you and I do. I hope when I get to.
Yeah, I don't know him. I talked to him on the phone once. He seemed like a great guy, but
Yeah. He's great. So he's got things going. Cuenca's a tough. He was explaining to us at dinner the other day. Cuenca's a great city. It's kind of tough to do business there. They don't promote. It's a UNESCO heritage site. It's a beautiful city. He's frustrated because they don't promote the city. People find it anyway with the internet these days.
Well, see,
but
that's a great.
You guys are doing such a service to Southern Ecuador.
No, but
here.
that's a great.
You guys are doing you're opening so many eyes to what's here and how you can live. There's not the equivalent to Cuenca that I'm
Right.
aware of. There's some people on the internet,
No, I'm sure,
JP and Amelia type of thing.
Yeah.
But
No,
you guys are doing
that's a good example, though, kind of what we're talking about, because take Vilcabamba, for example, right? Vilcabamba should be and is the jewel of this region. Mm-hmm. It's what's on the map in this region. It's what people should know about. Vilcabamba has worse facilities in terms of public facilities than just about any town in Ecuador, right? There's not a good playground for the kids. There's not a basketball court. The soccer field's in terrible shape. And on and on and on, right? And why? Why would the politicians in this area not see the big picture and say, hey, we need to pump some money into this town
Right.
specifically because it represents
right,
us, and then we need to promote it, and we need to bring. People here just don't really think that way.
Right.
And so again, it creates both the opportunity
Yep.
and sort of the difficulty of getting where you're trying to get to.
Well, so to your point, so the road from Cuenca to Loja, straight down, beautiful, right down the ridge of the mountains, most of it, 90% of the highway is great. But there's parts of it, and also from Guayaquil to Cuenca, right? We do both. It blows our minds that, you think about it, there's money, the Galapagos is big money, oil, bananas, fruits, shrimp, there's money, come on. Take a little chunk, fix the roads. So we hit parts of the road where there was a landslide or something, or a washout, and it's a year or two, they haven't fixed it. The bus has to go like this, the truck, the gasoline truck. What are you doing, man? Fix it, put a retaining wall, I know it's money, put the nets, put the retaining wall. It's like 5 spots. What are you doing? And everybody agrees, by the way. Everybody says, yeah, you're right, it's great. Sure. So it's priorities. I mean, there's just unbelievable. So there's things like that. I mean, we complain about the roads in the U.S., but if we have a rock slide area, they build a retaining wall and the net thing. I mean, you can't take the main road from Cuenca to Loja, your third to your fourth largest city. What are you doing? So it's things like that. It's hilarious almost.
It is.
Yeah, you kind of just have to just roll with the punches here and say, I'm not in the U.S. And some things they do better here. So, I mean, live, right? Yeah. Eat and live.
Well, and some of those dichotomies too, it's like the inefficiency of some of those things also means that they leave you alone in your life for the most part.
True that.
So it's kind of a balance there. It's like the roads are good enough.
It's fine.
Everything's kind of good enough.
Don't be tracking
and
me.
they leave me alone, so it's not too bad.
Let me go get my milk. Yeah.
right. If the roads were perfect, but they're bothering me about all this other stuff,
Yeah, that's definitely a trade-off. I'm on your side with that one. Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, much less. The situation, in the United States now in terms of tracking everything, maybe down here too, if we talk and our phone listens to us about a red Alfa Romeo, you're going to see the ads at night.
Sure.
They're tracking it's driving us crazy, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some weird stuff where like people are having the thoughts and it's popping up on their phone and they're like, I swear I never said this, I only thought about it.
That's not cool, that's a problem.
No, I mean, I've seen a few cases in my personal circle of that was a little wild.
That's not good.
Bob, is there anything we haven't covered yet that you want to talk about that I haven't brought up?
Well, we've been pretty wide ranging. I just think that, people should be aware. We're trying to get people to just be careful, right? We're in strange waters. The world's on fire, and I'm speaking more of the financial markets. Just protect, not forever, but for now. If things are crazy and the markets are unexplainably strong, right? Here's a couple stats real quick. You've heard of the index of leading economic indicators, right?
Sure.
Down 19 months in a row.
Okay.
84% of CEOs think there's a recession coming this year. 84%. Of CEOs. I'll go with the CEOs over Janet Yellen, right? Yeah. So nobody wants a recession. But if that's the case, right, then protect your capital. You should adopt more of a protective stance. At least we've got 5% money now. It's not exciting, but it's positive 5 is better than minus 32. Just recognize no tree grows to the sky. And then if you have a lot of powder dry, and there is a storm, and there's pearls on the beach, guess what? We're not fools. We're going to scoop them up. So you'll be a little richer than you thought in 5 or 10 years. So we're just very cautious. I think globally there's a lot of wacky stuff going on. We worry about another pandemic coming. God forbid, I don't know. But, so no, I think we've covered, I think, the pitch that you guys are making to everybody, the educational aspect between the retreats and your podcast is tremendous because people don't know. We didn't know. When I found you, it was like, wow, this guy's doing it. He's from Brooklyn. My God, I was thrilled. So, I think people also in Cuenca, the other thing I guess we should mention, because down here too, the medical, the doctors and dentists are trained, usually in the U.S. or whatever. They come back here. So you wouldn't have 8,000 Americans in Cuenca if there wasn't if there wasn't excellent
Cuenca,
MRIs
the
and
expat
surgeries
population is mostly retirement age.
Yeah, and so you wouldn't have, unless you had excellent medical, you wouldn't have that situation. English is widely spoken. You should, of course, learn Spanish. But I mean, I think it's just a nice situation. The climate here today, if you go to Panama or Costa Rica, it's hot. You got to be in that. You say all the time on your podcast, it's crazy here. It's like, it's San Diego. It's not humid. I know if you go to Zumba, it's humid. If you go to the Orient and so Zamora, but it's beautiful here. So I think the climate, I know Carl talks about it all the time too, and the mangoes and just the whole different thing. It's just a great appeal. We like all these other countries, but you know, this is our favorite, and so I think with some reason.
If people are interested in your services, if they want to do some retirement planning or some financial planning, is there? Are you guys looking?
Yeah, newcenturyplanning.com, and we just shot in the last year 24 short educational videos on important topics: Roth conversions or long-term care, inflation hedging, legacy planning. So we have white papers under the education tab. We have short videos. Obviously, with your permission, I'll post this up there. But I think there's enough there to start for people. And again, you know, in the current circumstances, protection of capital, don't underestimate the need for income. If you live to 85 or 95 like my dad, you need income, right? Maybe we should build in some boosts in the future, get some money out of the dollar. Don't forget about long-term care. Don't forget about tax planning. It's, you know, we swim in these waters every day. It's fairly complicated. Not to say that the front end, 30, 40 years of accumulation is easy, but it's more straightforward. You know, we see people, frankly, successful people, they kept their head down, they stayed healthy, maybe they stayed married, maybe they didn't, but basically they had a pretty nice run and they won the game. And so we're trying to tell them politely, you won the game, you know, stop playing a little bit.
Right.
There's no reason
Switch
for you to
modes a little bit.
Switch
yeah.
modes a little bit,
Yeah.
right? But much harder getting down the mountain than the front end. But no, thank you. We covered a lot of ground today. It was great.
Awesome. Well, thank you for
you.
taking the time.
Yeah, good
I
to see you.
enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
Guys, if you guys enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, hit the bell as well so you're notified of new content. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.
Hey, thanks.
Awesome.
If you're interested in real estate properties, all of our property videos will now be uploaded on a different channel. Please click the link in the description down below.